Cade pressed his forehead against the cold eyepiece of the massive telescope, feeling his breath fogging the metal. His shift had begun hours ago, and he'd spent most of that time mindlessly scanning the sky for any sign of celestial excitement. He was used to the hush of the observatory, used to the patterns of starlight and the low electronic hums from the tracking devices. Sometimes, though, he wondered if he was more asleep than awake. Once in a while, he would yawn so hard that tears gathered at the corners of his eyes, and he had to blink rapidly to refocus on the pinpricks of light overhead. Tonight, those pinpricks felt especially distant. He exhaled a slow breath and glanced over at the console, wishing desperately for a working coffee machine. It had broken the day before, and the repair wouldn't happen until tomorrow, leaving him stranded in a caffeine desert. He closed his eyes and muttered sarcastically, "Another thrilling Friday night in the glamorous life of an astronomer." He had said it out loud, but there was no one around to hear. The facility was a lonely fortress perched high on a rocky hillside, miles from the nearest sign of civilization. This isolation had once felt romantic and adventurous. Now it felt more like voluntary exile. Stretching stiffly, Cade pried himself away from the eyepiece and took a moment to crack his knuckles. Outside the window, the sky stretched on forever, a black canvas speckled with brilliant dots. He found himself fantasizing about something dramatic, a comet nearly clipping Earth's atmosphere, a brand new exoplanet that would make him famous, or maybe, just maybe, a real sign of extraterrestrial life. He had half-joked to a friend last week that even an alien abduction would be more exciting than his usual routine. He glanced at the digital clock, 2:13 a.m. The beep of a half-functioning alarm system that measured cosmic radiation made him jump. Then it fell silent again, as if mocking him for hoping there was anything new to discover. He walked over to a small table in the corner where the defunct coffee machine stood lifeless. Without coffee, the hours seemed endless. He prodded the machine, but it only produced a faint hiss of steam before giving up. Sighing, he turned back to the main panel of the observatory's control system. At least he had the stars. Even if they were predictable, they were steady companions. A faint swirl on one of the monitors snagged his attention, a slight blip that flickered across the data feed. It was so subtle, he might have missed it if he'd been too absorbed in his own boredom. Leaning closer, he tapped a few keys to enhance the image. He saw some sort of luminous phenomenon, a pulse of cobalt blue that seemed to shine for half a second, then wink out. His heart gave a surprising little thump. He adjusted the settings, trying to isolate the coordinates, but the data feed glitched. The swirl appeared again, this time in real time on the external cameras. Something was out there, and it looked like it was moving in the Earth's atmosphere, not in deep space. He felt his pulse quicken. It might be an unusual aurora, a meteor with uncommon properties, or perhaps a stray piece of space junk re-entering. But none of those explanations quite matched the color or the odd shape. He stepped away from the control board and approached the wide window that curved around the observatory dome. His eyes strained to see something through the glass. For a long moment, there was only darkness, the same black emptiness he'd grown used to. Then, a sudden streak of cobalt light cut across the sky, near silent but bright enough to make him gasp. It was descending rapidly. Cade fumbled for his phone, intending to take a quick video, but by the time he scrambled to find the camera app, the light had vanished beyond the rim of the hillside. He was caught in an instant of indecision. Should he call someone? Should he go outside to check? Curiosity won out. Adrenaline burned away his fatigue as he rushed across the observatory floor, nearly tripping over a coil of spare cables. He threw on his light jacket, not nearly warm enough for the cold night air, and slipped outside, leaving the vast dome behind. The landscape was bleak, just jagged rocks, scrub brush, and a narrow gravel road leading away from the facility. Above him, the stars glittered innocently, but to the southeast, a faint blue glow shimmered, like a distant lantern flickering in the dark. He swallowed, feeling his heart pound, and headed in that direction. His boots scraped over the uneven ground. Every so often, he had to pause to steady himself against the wind, which whipped his jacket open and stung his cheeks. Step by step, he drew closer to the cobalt glow, which seemed to lie just beyond a rocky outcrop. It lit the craggy hillside with an otherworldly radiance, enough that he could see every crevice in sharp relief. Cade stumbled over a loose stone and nearly lost his balance, but then he froze. The wind died, and he heard a low hum, a hum that definitely did not belong to anything natural. Part of him wanted to turn back, to pretend he hadn't seen any of this, but he couldn't stop himself. He took one more step, then another, until he cleared the outcrop. And there, resting in a small hollow in the rocky ground, was something that looked unmistakably like a craft. It was sleek and elliptical, radiating an ethereal glow, its surface reflecting the moonlight in subtle waves. He stared, breath catching his throat. Suddenly, a section of the craft's hull slid open soundlessly, revealing a ramp that touched the ground. He thought of all the science fiction he had ever read, all the movies he'd watched late at night, joking with friends about what he'd do in an alien invasion scenario. None of it felt remotely real now. He simply stood there, transfixed. Then a figure emerged, tall, clad in some metallic armor that caught the glow and refracted it. He'd never seen anything like it. At first, it was too bright to distinguish features, but slowly, the figure stepped forward into the moonlight, and he realized it was a woman, or at least humanoid and feminine. She moved with inhuman grace, each motion efficient and purposeful. Cade felt an irrational impulse to run, but he remained rooted to the spot, legs trembling. The strange woman turned her head, scanning the darkness, and then her eyes locked onto him. A metallic helmet obscured most of her face, though he could see the faint glow of some kind of visor. She lifted a gauntlet hand and pointed at him, stiffening, as if in alarm. For a moment, neither moved. Then, with lightning speed, she lunged forward. Cade let out a choked noise as she covered the distance between them almost instantly. He felt a jolt of fear so sharp, it nearly paralyzed him. This was it. He was either going to be vaporized or abducted, and he hadn't even had his coffee. Before he could protest, she grabbed him by the wrist. Despite her slim form, she was impossibly strong. She yanked him closer, seeming to assess him. He smelled ozone and a metallic tang. In a panic, he managed to stammer, I'm not dangerous, promise." Her visor flickered, and she pressed something on the side of her helmet. Then she spoke, but the words were an unintelligible series of melodic tones and clicks. He coughed out a nervous laugh, mind spinning. This was not how he'd planned to spend his shift. The alien woman stiffened at his laughter, then pressed another button on her helmet. This time, when she spoke, he understood her, sort of, "You human? That cannot be." Cade swallowed. Last I checked, yes." She took a rapid step back, releasing him with a jerk, as though he were something toxic. Her body language went from dangerously poised to outright panicked. "Human, that's not allowed. You are forbidden." He blinked. "Forbidden to whom?" She made a frustrated sound. "This is a complication. I shouldn't have landed here. If they find out." She cut herself off, scanning the sky anxiously. Then her gaze darted back to him. "I can't leave you. They'll know I was here. You'll report me." 1,000 half-formed questions crowded his mind, but he was too overwhelmed to speak. Instead, he watched numbly as she tapped something on her wrist. A swirling blue light enveloped him. He felt a sickening rush of vertigo. The ground vanished from beneath his feet, replaced by a bright swirl of alien technology, and a moment later, he stumbled, nearly pitching forward onto a cold metallic floor. He coughed and glanced around wildly. He was definitely inside the craft now. The walls curved smoothly, lit by paneling that glowed a soft turquoise. The woman stood beside a console, tapping an array of alien symbols. She yanked off her helmet, revealing long strands of silver hair that tumbled around a face etched with tension. Her skin had an odd sheen, like living pearl. She was undeniably alien and undeniably alarmed. Cade tried a feeble joke. "I guess you don't believe in knocking." She spun to face him, eyes flashing a bright violet. "Quiet. My instruments, they're detecting your life signs. This is all wrong." "All wrong," he echoed, hands trembling. He wanted to be braver. He wanted to sound heroic. Instead, his voice cracked. Aren't you supposed to dissect me, or something? At least do the creepy alien experiment routine. A faint flicker of confusion crossed her face. She placed a hand on the console. Dissect? No, we don't do that. You humans are no. It's complicated. Complicated how? Her eyes flicked to the console readouts. She flinched at something. Then she looked at him again with a mixture of regret and urgency. I'll explain. But first, we leave. We must leave your planet now. Cade wanted to argue, but he felt a dull jolt run through the floor as the ship powered up. A hum rose around them, and the walls seemed to tremble. He realized with a jolt that they were taking off. The possibility that he could still leap out of the hatch and run vanished. He was along for the ride, whether he liked it or not. His heart pounded so violently that he gripped a nearby railing just to stay upright. Outside a small viewport, the horizon tilted. He caught a glimpse of the observatory dome shrinking away, the world dropping beneath them at a dizzying speed. This was it. He was, in every sense of the phrase, being abducted by an alien woman. It was the strangest moment of his life. And yet, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered that he had asked for something more interesting than his boring routine. Well, here it was. He tried to swallow, but his mouth felt dry. So, do you have a name? Or do I just call you my alien abductor? She frowned, perhaps deciphering his tone. Valra, she said, though the accent gave it a lilting, musical sound. My name is Valra. Cade, he offered, voice faint. Nice to meet you, I guess. She let out a long breath and nodded, though she still radiated agitation. We can discuss pleasantries later. Right now, I need to ensure we're not tracked. If the Syndicate realizes I've come into contact with a human, it will complicate things, possibly for both of us. He had no idea who or what the Syndicate was, but the name sounded ominous. I'm not liking the sound of that. Valra didn't respond. She turned back to the console, tapping commands. The ship's engines whirred louder, and then everything outside the viewport blurred. Cade gasped as the sky turned to a swirl of starlight, bright streaks elongating. It was like every science fiction movie scene of faster-than-light travel come to life. He clung to the railing, knuckles white. Hyperspace jump, Valra said over her shoulder. Primitive Earth vessels can't do this. He let out a shaky laugh. Yeah, no kidding. For a moment, the only sounds were the thrumming of the ship's systems and the ragged hush of Cade's breathing. He felt a wave of dizziness, quickly replaced by a surreal wonder. This was real. He was in an alien craft, zipping through some cosmic corridor. He was too shocked to panic further, so he settled on mild disbelief. So, he tried to modulate his voice. Why is a human forbidden? Valra hesitated, still facing the console. Because your species has secrets locked in its genetic structure. My people made contact with Earth centuries ago. They discovered that humans, some lines of humans, carry something ancient and powerful. It's better if your kind remains isolated, hidden. At least, that's what we've been taught. He blinked several times, trying to process this. The notion that humanity was carrying some cosmic secret sounded absurd, like a plot from a B-movie. And yet, here he stood, abducted by a worried alien who seemed convinced of it. So, we're dangerous? That's what they say, she murmured. Then she glanced sidelong at him. But seeing you here, you seem less like a galactic threat and more like a confused child. Gee, thanks. She offered a faint shrug, looking genuinely torn. I never expected to actually meet a human. Our territories don't overlap. The Syndicate enforces strict rules about humans. They claim to be protecting you from the rest of the galaxy. Well, that's comforting, Cade muttered, because it really feels like I'm protected right now. Valra seemed not to catch his sarcasm. She tapped her wristband. I need to get some clarity on this. Zix, are you online? A holographic projection crackled to life near the console. It formed into a crystalline shape that glowed with shimmering golden light, rotating slowly in midair. Then a crisp, faintly amused voice spoke. Online, Captain Valra. I see we have new company. The forbidden kind, no less. Cade stared in amazement. What the? Vaura exhaled, ignoring his reaction. Zix, scan the sector. Make sure no syndicate vessels are on our tail. And run a check on this human. He seems ordinary. Zix's golden facets pulsed. Scanning now. Please note that harboring a human is illegal under 73 intergalactic statutes. Shall I place a call to the relevant authorities? Don't you dare, Vaura snapped. Just run the scan. Cade managed a weak wave at the hologram. I'm Kate. Nice to meet you. Zix pulsed again. Greetings, Cade the human. Fascinating vitals. You appear terrified, but your oxygen levels are surprisingly stable. Thanks, Cade muttered. I guess. Vaura drummed her fingers on the console. Enough chatter. Focus on scanning. A soft hum filled the cabin, and the holographic shape rotated more swiftly. Meanwhile, Cade tried to make sense of his predicament. He looked at Vaura, then at Zix, then back at the swirling hyperspace patterns outside. This was so far beyond his routine that he felt like reality was folding in on itself. Zix spoke after a moment. Captain, I detect no immediate syndicate pursuit. However, the presence of a human within our vessel will not remain secret for long. The jump signature might draw attention. Vaura's shoulders tensed. Then we'll need to land somewhere safe, somewhere crowded. Zoran Prime might be our best bet. Cade couldn't resist a scoff. Zoran Prime? That sounds like a discount electronics store. Zix let out a synthetic approximation of a sigh. It is, in fact, an interstellar marketplace hub with a robust black market sector. It might keep you two hidden for a while. Vaura nodded. We'll go there. Then we'll figure out the next step. What next step? Cade interjected, voice edging toward panic. You abducted me, remember? I was not happily, but I was at least minding my own business at an observatory. I'd sort of like to go home. Earth. You know, the planet you just yanked me off of. Vaura shot him a troubled look. I can't just drop you back. The Syndicate might already be aware you exist. And if they track your location, Earth could become a target. He opened his mouth, then closed it. That was not what he wanted to hear. So, my presence is endangering my entire planet? Great. This day just keeps getting better. If it makes you feel better, Zix offered helpfully, you're now the single most interesting member of your species. That does not help. Zix. Vaura snapped, though a small part of her mouth twitched, as if she wanted to laugh at Cade's overwhelmed expression. Cade took a shaky breath. Okay, so, Zoran Prime. Then what? Vaura pulled a lever, and the swirling hyperspace corridor outside began to shift. She glanced at him, her tone softening. Then we keep you alive. I figure that's a good starting point. He grimaced. I can't argue with that. She steadied herself as the ship lurched out of hyperspace, revealing a breathtaking view of a star field. Off to one side loomed what looked like a giant metallic city, suspended in the void, bristling with neon lights and busy docking platforms. Streams of smaller vessels buzzed in and out, giving the impression of an enormous cosmic beehive. Cade felt his jaw drop. Zoran Prime, Vaura said quietly, as though stating the obvious. Zix made a flourish. Welcome to the busiest marketplace in this quadrant of the galaxy. Do try not to get dismembered. Cade wondered if that was supposed to be a joke, but judging by the seriousness in Vaura's face, it might not be. The vessel glided forward, weaving through the chaotic traffic as Vaura manipulated the controls with impressive finesse. She guided them to a cramped docking bay, ringed with flickering lights and battered maintenance droids. The minute they settled, an automated voice crackled over the comm system in a language Cade didn't recognize. Vaura tapped the console, replying in the same language. Then she stood, tugging on the collar of her armor. We can't just walk around with you looking obviously human. We'll need a disguise. He rolled his eyes. Right, let me guess. A big cloak, maybe a hood, so no one sees my face. That always works in the movies. To his surprise, she nodded. Precisely. And so, in a bizarre turn of events, Cade found himself draped in a long, tattered robe with the hood pulled low over his forehead. The fabric smelled faintly of machine oil, and it was riddled with patches. Vaura took a moment to calibrate a small device on his wrist, A translator unit, she explained, and then stepped back. Try not to talk too much. Your accent will be noticeable, even with the translator. I'll do my best, he replied. He was painfully aware of how out of place he felt. They exited the ship into the docking bay, which was alive with foreign chatter and the hum of alien technology. Tall insectoid creatures scuttled by, carrying crates. A slug-like being with a cluster of black eyes glared at them from shadowy corner. Steam hissed from overhead pipes, and flickering neon signs displayed symbols he couldn't read. It was like stepping into the ultimate science fiction dream, except it was real, and it smelled of sulfur and burned metal. Vaura led the way, keeping her posture confident. Cade stayed close, trying not to trip over the hem of his robe. Zix's voice crackled from a handheld communicator Vaura carried, occasionally offering snarky commentary. Turn left here, Captain, where you'll walk straight into a Sarthak weapon vendor. They navigated through winding corridors lined with makeshift shops. Strange liquids bubbled in clear cylinders. Bizarre creatures squawked in cages, and the air buzzed with languages Cade had never imagined. More than once, he almost forgot to breathe, enthralled by the spectacle. Yet he also felt an undercurrent of danger, a certain tension in the air, as though violence could erupt at any moment. Vaura stopped outside a dingy stall with a metal shutter half closed. A sign overhead glowed red, with symbols that didn't appear in the translator's database. She turned to Cade. We can get some fresh gear here, something to hide. Your heat signature so the Syndicate can't easily track you. Stay close. He nodded, stepping inside behind her. The place was cramped and smelled faintly of ozone. A wiry alien with 4 arms emerged from behind a counter, letting out a guttural greeting. Vaura responded in that same melodic language. The vendor peered suspiciously at Cade, who tried to look as nonchalant as possible. As they haggled, Cade's gaze wandered. Crates stacked against the wall flickered with hints of advanced technology. He wondered what it all did. He took a half step to get a better look, only to feel Vaura's gloved hand grab his shoulder, pulling him back just in time to avoid a shadow passing by the stall entrance. She hissed in his ear, "Careful." When not alone, Cade peered out the corner of his eye. A group of heavily armored figures prowled the market corridor, scanning the crowd with glowing red optics. Their armor was a dark crimson, emblazoned with an emblem he didn't recognize, a stylized fong or claw. Vaura tensed. "Is that them?" Cade whispered. She gave a minute nod, lips tight. "Syndicate patrol." Sure enough, the lead figure barked an order, and the group fanned out, stepping into stalls and demanding identification. Cade's heart hammered. This was worse than any dream or movie scenario. He half expected a firefight to break out. Vaura turned back to the vendor, her voice dropping to a rapid hush. The vendor's multiple eyes blinked in unison. He rummaged under the counter, producing a small device that resembled a silver cuff. Vaura snatched it, slid it across to Cade, and motioned for him to attach it around his forearm. He did so, wincing as it pinched for a moment, then beeped softly. A faint warmth radiated along his skin. The vendor jabbered something, and Vaura tossed him a small pouch that clinked, currency, apparently. She grabbed Cade's arm and hustled him toward a rear exit, an archway covered by a ragged curtain. They slipped through, emerging into a narrow alley lit by a single flickering lamp overhead. The smell of rotting food and chemical runoff made Cade wrinkle his nose. But at least they were away from the patrol, he hoped. Vaura pressed a button on her wristband, speaking in a low voice. "Zix, which way?" Zix's voice crackled back. 2 blocks to the east, there's a service tunnel that leads to an old docking port. You can hide there until the patrol passes. Cade nearly sighed in relief. But before they could move, a harsh shout rang out behind them. They turned to see one of the crimson-armored figures stepping through the archway, weapon raised. The visor reflected the glow of the lamp, making them look downright demonic. Vaura shoved Cade behind her. The figure snarled something in a guttural language, then switched to a more standard tone. "Identify yourselves." Vaura's stance went taut, and she reached slowly for a hidden holster on her hip. "We're just travelers," she said, voice carefully neutral. "Travelers don't hide in alleys," the syndicate's soldier growled. He advanced a step, pointing the muzzle of his weapon at her. A second soldier, equally imposing, stepped in behind him. "We've heard rumors about an alien who shouldn't be here. Possibly a human." Cade's stomach dropped. He tried to keep his face hidden under the hood, but his mind raced. If they discovered him, it could turn into a shootout in seconds. Valra stood rigid, as though calculating her odds. The soldier took another step. "Remove the hood," he ordered. Cade held his breath. For a moment, it felt like time froze. Then Valra whipped her sidearm out with lightning reflexes and fired a stunning blast. The soldier convulsed and collapsed. The second soldier shouted an alarm, raising a communicator. Valra darted forward, hooking a leg around his ankle and slamming him into the wall with a clang. He went down, but not before his gauntlet hand activated something on his wrist device. A shrill alarm echoed from the corridor beyond. Valra grabbed Cade's arm. "Run!" They sprinted down the alley, footsteps echoing on the metal grates. Cade's heart pounded in his ears. At the end of the alley, they skidded around a corner, nearly crashing into a trio of lizard-like merchants carrying large crates. The merchants hissed in protest, but Valra barely slowed, weaving through. Behind them, more shouts erupted. Red beams of scanning lights cut through the gloom, searching for them. Cade's lungs burned. He had never been in a chase scene, much less on an alien space station. Yet here he was, adrenaline surging. He saw Valra glance back, her expression grim. Their pursuers were fanning out, blocking the way back to the docking bay. They needed a quick exit. A cluster of hovering vehicles lined a small side platform, all apparently for cargo transport. Valra paused, cursing under her breath. "We need a ride." Cade let out a shaky laugh. "Grand theft hovercraft? You sure know how to show a guy a good time." She ignored his sarcasm and leaped onto the nearest hovercraft, a squat vehicle with a flatbed for cargo. She pressed a few buttons on a control panel, and it sputtered to life. "Get on," she commanded. He scrambled onto the passenger's seat, wincing as the craft lurched into the air about 3 feet off the ground. It jerked left, then right, nearly throwing him off. "Do you know how to drive one of these?" he asked, voice high with alarm. Valra gritted her teeth, fiddling with the controls. "Yes, sort of." Another blast of alarm behind them spurred her on. She gunned the throttle, and the hovercraft shot forward, weaving wildly through a labyrinth of crates, posts, and unsuspecting aliens. Cade clung to the side, every muscle clenched. They careened around a corner, knocking over a stack of metallic barrels that clanged and rolled in all directions. Shouts of protest and confusion erupted behind them. Valra managed to right the hovercraft, guiding it onto a main thoroughfare that stretched through the station. Up ahead, an enormous neon sign flickered, advertising something in a swirling alien script. Shopfronts spilled over with more bizarre goods, and crowds of shoppers parted in alarm as the hovercraft raced through. Cade caught sight of the syndicate soldiers emerging from a side path, their weapons at the ready. One of them fired a bolt of energy that sizzled past, striking a stall and sending sparks flying. "They're shooting at us," he yelped. "Stay down." Valra barked. She angled the hovercraft lower, skimming just above the ground. Another shot whizzed overhead, blasting a chunk from a neon sign. Debris rained down, scattering the crowds. A reptilian alien screeched and dove for cover. Zix's voice crackled from Valra's wrist communicator. "Captain, your reckless flight path is generating multiple complaints, and the Syndicate is flooding the station's security channels with a target lock on your craft." Valra swore under her breath. "Find us a route out of here, Zix." The AI replied, "You could try sublevel G near the old docking ports. There's an abandoned corridor that might lead you to a maintenance bay. I'm uploading directions." She nodded, eyes fixed on a cluster of Syndicate soldiers who had commandeered another hover vehicle behind them. "Got it." Cade risked a glance over his shoulder and immediately wished he hadn't. The Syndicate had closed the gap. They wore dark crimson armor that bristled with weapon attachments. Their pilot seemed more adept than Valra at handling the craft, easily dodging obstacles. He spotted multiple silhouettes behind them, presumably backup. We won't outrun them forever, Cade muttered. Valra's jaw set. No, but we only need to lose them long enough to get to that corridor. She swerved sharply into a narrower side street, flipping a switch on the dashboard. The hovercraft roared, picking up speed. They blasted past startled shopkeepers, nearly crashing into a stack of metal pipes. Ahead, the corridor angled into a downward ramp. Valra took it at full throttle. A series of overhead lights blinked erratically, casting the world in strobing flashes. Behind them, the Syndicate's pursuing craft tried to match their descent, but clipped the edge of the corridor's entrance. Sparks flew, and the vehicle spun out momentarily before regaining control. That small delay gave Valra precious seconds to reach the sublevel. She spotted a rusted sliding door on the left, half embedded in the corridor wall. "That's it," she shouted to Cade, pointing. He saw it too. It looked barely operational, but there was no time for second thoughts. She slowed just enough to approach the door and slammed a palm onto a nearby control panel. At first, nothing happened. Then the door shuddered and began to open, squealing in protest. A laser blast slammed into the hovercraft's rear end, making them spin. Cade yelped, clinging on for dear life. Valra gritted her teeth, yanking the controls to steady them. Another blast sizzled overhead. She maneuvered the craft through the half-open door, scraping the sides in a shower of sparks. As soon as they were through, she hit a switch that sent the door screeching closed behind them. In the corridor outside, the Syndicate craft screeched to a halt. The soldiers pounded on the door, but it was thick and old, and the mechanism groaned stubbornly. It might hold them off for a minute, maybe two. Cade staggered off the hovercraft and doubled over, breathing hard. His ears rang, and his heart hammered in his chest. Well, he gasped, that was new. Valra slid off the pilot's seat, scanning the dark interior. The place was some kind of abandoned maintenance bay, scattered with broken machinery and dusty crates. Overhead lighting flickered, revealing a wide corridor that stretched deeper into the station. She grabbed Cade's sleeve, pulling him along. "We need to keep moving. They'll find another way around." He followed, stumbling over debris. "Can't we just take your ship and leave?" "Not with the station on alert," she replied, her tone grim. "Zoran Prime has security measures that can shut down departing vessels if there's a major incident. The Syndicate will have flagged us already." Cade groaned. "You mean we're stuck here? Until we come up with a better plan?" Valra said tersely. A rush of hopelessness washed through him. He was light years from home, wrapped up in interstellar politics he didn't understand. A day ago, the biggest problem in his life had been a broken coffee machine. Now, he was a fugitive alien in an alien marketplace. It was almost funny, if it weren't terrifying. They crept through the deserted corridors, guided by the faint overhead lights. Every now and then, they heard distant voices or the clang of machinery. Zix's calm suggestions through the communicator offered them routes to avoid major checkpoints. Eventually, they came across a disused cargo elevator with an older control panel. Valra nudged it, and the doors slid open with a belabored sigh. Inside, the air smelled stale, and the floor was covered in a fine layer of dust. She pressed a sequence on the control panel, and the elevator rumbled to life, descending further into the bowels of the station. The faint hum of the elevator was the only sound for a while. Cade slumped against the wall, letting out a long, weary breath. Valra eyed him. "You look exhausted." He gave a hollow laugh. "Exhausted doesn't even begin to cover it. My entire worldview just got flipped upside down. I should be freaking out, but I guess I've gone numb for now." She nodded, almost sympathetically. "I can't claim I understand how you feel. But I didn't plan this, either." "Right," he muttered. "Because you just happened to land near my observatory and abduct me for no reason." She frowned. "I didn't abduct you for no reason. I was on a scouting mission. I'm searching for something. Something the Syndicate wants. I landed to recalibrate my instruments, and I found you. When I realized you were human, it complicated everything." He crossed his arms, suppressing a shiver. "So, what are you searching for?" She hesitated. The elevator dinged softly as they reached a new level, and the doors groaned open. She stepped out, checking the corridor with careful glances. "I'll tell you, but not here." We should find a secure location. Stay close. Cade followed, dragging his feet through the gloom. They navigated a series of twisting hallways, some flooded ankle-deep with murky water from broken pipes. The occasional overhead light flickered, as if on the verge of burnout. At last, they found what looked like an old maintenance office, steel walls, a single console covered in cobwebs. Valerie used a handheld device to sweep the room, presumably checking for hidden surveillance. When she seemed satisfied, she gestured for him to sit on a rusted bench. She sat across from him, resting her arms on her knees. Her expression was solemn. Listen carefully, Cade. The Syndicate runs large portions of this galaxy. They have advanced technology, and their laws are strict. For centuries, they've treated Earth as a forbidden zone, supposedly to protect your species, but many suspect they're also guarding a secret about humans. Cade nodded, trying to hide the trembling in his hands. Go on. When I was young, Valra said, voice quieter, I heard rumors that humans carried a genetic inheritance from one of the ancient starfaring races, an inheritance that could either be harnessed or destroyed. The Syndicate denies this publicly, but behind closed doors, they're obsessed with controlling or eradicating any trace of that inheritance. That's insane, Cade breathed. Is it? Valra held his gaze. You've heard of myths on your planet about gods who came from the sky, advanced beings who might have tinkered with early human development. They're not just myths. Cade ran a hand through his hair, mind reeling. This is a lot to take in. So what do I have to do with any of it? I'm just a random guy who likes telescopes. That's the thing, Valrus said. If you have that genetic marker, the Syndicate will want you either under their control or gone. In any local population near, you could become collateral damage. That's why humans are forbidden from traveling beyond Earth, so no one can exploit or weaponize them. He swallowed hard. So, in other words, you save me from them, or you doom me by picking me up? She exhaled, something like regret in her eyes. I didn't have a choice. If they found you at that observatory, it could have been worse. I thought maybe I could protect you until I figure out a safe plan. Cade let out a shaky breath. Lucky me. The tension in the room eased slightly as neither spoke for a moment. Finally, Valra stood and tapped her wrist device. Zix, what's the nearest star system where we can hide for longer? Zoran Prime won't be safe now. Zix's voice crackled, assessing. Captain, there's an ancient ruin on the outskirts of the Muriel sector, not heavily patrolled. However, it is rumored to hold artifacts from the time when humans were first engineered. The Syndicate might have an interest there as well. Valra's eyes flicked to Cade. He shrugged helplessly. Well, if it offers answers, maybe that's what we need. Zix pulsed. Understood. I'll map a route. But first, you'll need to get off Zoran Prime without detection. Good luck with that. They exchanged a look. Valra reached for her sidearm. One thing at a time, then. Cade, are you ready? He gave a hollow laugh. Ready as I'll ever be. The journey back to her ship turned into a tense game of hide-and-seek. The station was on partial lockdown, with Syndicate squads combing the corridors. They navigated maintenance shafts and service tunnels, slipping past barricades. Cade's heart remained lodged in his throat, but somehow, through a combination of Valra's skill, Zix's guidance, and a fair bit of luck, they managed to evade detection. When they finally slipped aboard Valra's ship, the ramp sealed behind them with a comforting hiss. Cade nearly collapsed onto the metal floor, relief making his legs wobble. Valra tapped the console to initiate a stealth launch sequence. Zix's hologram flickered into existence beside her. We only have a short window to escape before station security logs the hangar. I recommend you not crash into anything on the way out. Valra rolled her eyes. Thank you for the helpful tip, Zix. Their engines powered up with a low rumble. Outside the viewport, Cade saw the docking bay's doors open, revealing the star-speckled void. For a moment, no alarm sounded, no pursuit seemed imminent. Valra guided the ship out with careful precision, weaving around traffic lanes. Then, behind them, klaxons began to wail. Looks like they spotted us, Cade murmured. Valra's jaw tightened. Hold on. She accelerated, flipping the ship into a high-speed departure corridor. The background stars streaked by. A dull shudder rocked them as the station's automated defense grid attempted to target them. Bright beams lanced across the darkness, but Valra rolled the ship expertly, dodging them with incredible dexterity. Cade's stomach clenched at the maneuver, but he was too terrified to utter more than a startled croak. Then the stars elongated again in that dizzying swirl of faster-than-light transition. The klaxons and the station vanished in a blink, replaced by the infinite corridor of hyperspace. Cade sagged into the co-pilot chair, exhaling in relief. We made it. Valra let out a long breath, flicking a few switches to stabilize the flight. Yes, for now. Cade watched the rainbow lines of hyperspace dance across the viewport. So, these ruins we're heading to, you really think they hold answers about this genetic inheritance? She leaned back, her armor clinking softly. I'm not certain, but it's the only lead I have. If the ancient starfaring race left behind any knowledge, it might be hidden there. He lifted a trembling hand. Well, it's official. I've gone from bored astronomer to cosmic fugitive. My mother would be so proud. A small smile played on Valra's lips. You handle terror with humor. Interesting coping mechanism. It's either that or scream, he said with a shrug. She turned her gaze to the swirling void outside. I suppose that's fair. During the trip through hyperspace, they took turns resting and monitoring the sensors for any sign of syndicate pursuit. Zix kept watch, occasionally chiming in with status updates or snarky remarks. Despite the tension, Cade found a strange sense of camaraderie growing. He still didn't fully trust Valra. She had abducted him, after all, but he sensed her intentions weren't malicious. She was navigating a world of secrets and danger, just like him. When the final jump ended, the ship emerged in a remote sector of space dominated by a barren world swirling with dusty red clouds. A series of rings encircled the planet, shimmering with ice and rock. It was beautiful in a stark, lonely way. In orbit, Cade could make out fragments of what might have been ancient structures, satellites, or stations long abandoned. Valra guided the ship down to the planet's surface, through thick dust storms that clawed at the hull. They landed near a cluster of towering rock formations. Through the wind-swept viewports, Cade glimpsed the crumbling remains of what might have been pillars or walls. It was hard to tell with all the swirling grit in the air. He pulled on a breather mask Valra handed him. So, this is the ancient ruin? Looks more like a sandstorm to me. She nodded, voice slightly muffled by her own mask. The environment is harsh, but the sensors indicate a structure beneath that ridge. Let's move quickly. They disembarked, battered by fierce gusts of wind. The sand stung Cade's exposed skin. He followed Valra's lead, trudging over. Rocky terrain. Each step sank into drifts of red dust. Zix's voice echoed from a handheld scanner, providing navigation. After several minutes, they reached a jagged opening in the side of a cliff. Inside, the air was still almost oppressive. A wide hallway stretched before them, its walls carved with intricate symbols that glowed faintly whenever Valra's wrist light passed over them. A sense of age and mystery pressed in on Cade. The architecture was undeniably alien, and it bore a resemblance to patterns he'd seen in pictures of ancient Earth civilizations, like some cosmic sibling separated by millennia. They ventured deeper. The corridor opened into a vast chamber with a high vaulted ceiling. At its center stood a column of translucent crystal, taller than two people stacked. Strange, swirling lights shimmered within the crystal, forming shapes reminiscent of star clusters. Valra slowed, eyes scanning the walls. Look at these carvings. They show figures that look human interacting with beings of my race, or something close to it. Cade approached, brushing away layers of dust. The carved figures were stylized, but clearly depicted a meeting or union of species. So it's true, he murmured. We had contact ages ago. A gentle hum filled the chamber, emanating from the crystal column. Zix's voice piped up from the scanner. I'm detecting an energy signature tied to a biometric trigger. It appears to respond to certain genetic markers. Both of them turned to look at Cade. He felt a flutter of unease. You think it might respond to me? Valra gave a slight nod. It's worth a try. He swallowed. And if it kills me? She shook her head, though her eyes betrayed a hint of worry. We'll hope it doesn't. Trepidation gnawed at him, but an odd curiosity tugged harder. He stepped forward, hesitating just a foot from the crystal. He raised a trembling hand, placing his palm gently against the cool surface. At first, nothing happened. Then, as if awakened, the crystal glowed more intensely. The humming swelled, filling the air with resonance that vibrated through his bones. A surge of warmth shot up his arm and into his chest. His vision blurred, and images flashed behind his eyelids. Starfields swirling into shapes, distant planets, and towering cities. He saw glimpses of robed figures conducting some grand experiment involving early humans. The sensations were overwhelming, like watching thousands of years of history compressed into mere seconds. He jerked his hand away, gasping. The glow faded, though not entirely. The hum settled to a low thrum, pulsing in time with his quickened heartbeat. He stumbled back, and Valra caught him by the shoulders. Cade? What happened? He tried to articulate the torrent of impressions. I saw them. They engineered us. Part of your ancestors, or your people's ancestors, spliced their own genetic code into early humans. It was meant to be a contingency plan, something about a cosmic threat. They wanted to hide this power in humans so it couldn't be found easily. That's why we were kept isolated. We're like guardians of some hidden code. Valra's jaw tightened. And the Syndicate wants to exploit or eradicate that code. He nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. That's the gist. If they get their hands on a human with the right genes, they could unlock whatever that ancient power is. Or they could try to wipe us out entirely to prevent anyone else from using it. A sudden noise echoed through the chamber entrance. Footsteps and muffled voices. Valra spun, leveling her weapon. A group of Syndicate soldiers filed in, weapons drawn. Their leader, a scarred figure with a half-cybernetic face, glowered at them. You've gone too far, Valra. This ends now. Cade's pulse soared. He could practically taste the tension in the air. The Syndicate leader aimed a rifle-like weapon at them. Hand over the human. You have no idea the power you're tampering with. Valra squared her shoulders. Neither do you. You'd use it for destruction. Better we use it, the leader hissed, than let it fall into unknown hands. Humans have no place in this galaxy. Cade felt anger spark alongside his fear. So you want me caged or dead? That's your solution. You're a danger, the leader snarled, stepping forward. Don't blame me for taking precautions. The Syndicate protects this galaxy from what it can't understand. Surrender now, or we open fire. Valra shifted, pointing her sidearm at the group. But she was outnumbered at least 6-1. The tension hovered at a breaking point, adrenaline pumping through Cade's veins. He glanced at the crystal column behind him. If they blasted it, who knew what might happen? Suddenly, Zix's voice rang out from the communicator on Valra's belt. Captain, I have an idea. Please brace yourselves. Before either of them could ask what that meant, the crystal column brightened again. A searing flash of light burst from it, filling the chamber. With a disorienting radiance, the Syndicate soldiers shouted in alarm, covering their visors. The energy knocked them off balance, some tumbling to the floor. Valra grabbed Cade's wrist, pulling him aside as the beam lanced across the room. The entire chamber rumbled, cracks snaking along the walls. Run, she shouted. They bolted for a side passage as chunks of the ceiling began to collapse. The Syndicate soldiers scrambled in confusion, some pinned by falling debris. Alarms shrieked. Dust choked the air. Cade stumbled, nearly falling over a fallen pillar, but Valra hauled him up, guiding him into a tunnel that sloped upward. A distant roar echoed behind them as the ruin seemed to crumble under the unleashed energy. At last, they emerged onto a ledge near where they'd parked the ship. The dust storm raged, but the outline of Valra's craft was visible. She pressed a remote on her wristband, and the ramp lowered. Together, they sprinted inside, battered by sand. Zix's hologram flickered in the cockpit, swirling with golden sparks. Apologies for the theatrics, but I had to do something to deter them. The crystal's energies were quite useful. Valrus stumbled to the controls, and Cade collapsed into the co-pilot's seat. "You nearly brought the whole place down," he panted. "Better than letting the Syndicate capture you," Zix replied. "We can't stay here." Valrus started the engines, dust swirling as the ship powered up. The ruined temple behind them rumbled ominously, spires collapsing in a massive cloud. Cade felt a pang of sorrow for the lost knowledge, but there was no time to grieve. They lifted off, punching through the stormy sky. His mind reeled from everything he had learned and experienced. Once clear of the atmosphere, Valra set a course away from the planet, navigating through the ring debris. She slumped back in the pilot's seat, exhaling. "At least we have confirmation now. You do carry that ancient code." Cade stared at the swirling planet below. "So what does that mean for me?" She reached out, resting a hand on his shoulder. "It means you're more important than you ever realized. It also means this isn't over. The Syndicate won't give up. Not if they believe you're the key to unlocking a power that could reshape the galaxy." He closed his eyes, a mixture of fear and resolve settling in his chest. "I don't want this. I was just a guy looking at stars." "I know," she murmured. "But sometimes fate doesn't ask permission." A silence fell between them, broken only by the gentle hum of the ship's systems. Zix flickered. "There may be a safe haven on Valra's homeworld, or we could attempt to hide somewhere else. The galaxy is vast." Valra nodded slowly. "Yes, but Earth also deserves to know the truth, eventually. We can't hide this forever, and perhaps your people should prepare for what might come." Cade looked at her, feeling a strange swirl of emotions. She had gone from being his abductor to something closer to an ally, maybe even a friend. The stark reality of his situation weighed on him, but so did a spark of curiosity. If his genetic heritage held some cosmic significance, maybe he had a responsibility to help. He managed a small smile. "Let's survive the next few days first. Then we can figure out how to save the galaxy." Valra chuckled, the tension in her posture easing. "Deal." Zix hummed approvingly. "Excellent. I shall mark that as your official plan. Step 1, survive. Step 2, save the galaxy." Cade laughed despite himself. In the swirling darkness of space, their little ship felt like a tiny speck of defiance against powerful forces. He didn't know exactly where this path would lead him, nor how he would handle the dangers ahead. But for the first time in years, he felt truly alive. He looked down at his hands, wondering what ancestral code lay hidden in his DNA, waiting to be revealed or harnessed. There would be questions. There would be battles, both literal and figurative. But he wasn't alone anymore. Valra had her reasons for protecting him, and he couldn't deny that her fierce determination was comforting. Zix, for all its sarcasm, seemed a valuable ally as well. A mismatched trio, on the run from a galaxy-spanning syndicate, haunted by the ghosts of an ancient civilization. Maybe, just maybe, this was the grand adventure he'd always fantasized about in the long, lonely nights at the observatory. It was certainly a far cry from normalcy, and part of him still craved the safety of Earth. But there was no turning back now, not entirely. He turned in his seat, looking at Valra as she set coordinates for the next jump. She met his gaze, offering a silent nod of solidarity. Beyond the hull, stars glittered with silent mystery. A swirl of color enveloped them as they slipped back into faster-than-light travel. In the blur of that cosmic highway, Cade allowed himself a final fleeting thought. The alien woman abducted me, but she panicked when she realized I was human. Now, we'd both seen the truth hidden beneath that simple fact, and the future of more than one world might depend on what happened next. He closed his eyes, letting the hum of the engines lull him. Whatever came, he was ready, or at least, he was willing to face it. Human, forbidden, or otherwise, he would no longer be a passive observer of the stars. He'd become a participant in their story, woven into a tapestry that stretched light years beyond Earth's horizon. And perhaps that was how it was always meant to be.